Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. I'm super excited for today's guest. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Huge pleasure. Thank you, Young.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. Let's jump right in. Why don't you tell the listeners what you do for a living?
Yeah, 7 months ago, I'll say it was a big change in my life where I left the world of W-2 being an employer in the corporate world and went on my own. So I'm out here. I've started a series of businesses and other projects. My core is my company called Group 18, where I help with business transformation, which is what I did prior to that. I also do a lot of financial modeling work, partly because I love it. And I get in the zone sitting in Excel for 3 hours, so I do that. Also started another company called Meshwell that is focused on more transformation for services companies, kind of a focus there, starting with accounting firms first. Also run a franchise hair salon in LA. I started a nonprofit angel investing group focused on my high school. And then, I do rucking, as you know. I invite people to come walk 3.6 miles with me every month, carrying a heavy weight on their back. And so, yeah, doing a lot of experiments, but those are the main things that I'm up to right now.
That's awesome. That sounds like not a lot of stuff at all, actually. It sounds like you're
Yeah,
bored. Yeah, you're just like in early retirement at this point. That's what it
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
like. Well, let's parse it out. So walk us through
yeah.
your journey. How did you get to this point where you are now dabbling in so many entrepreneurial experiences? Do you mind sharing a
Yeah,
little
it
bit about
started.
your professional career?
I appreciate that. So it started professional life. I graduated out of a mechanical engineering program. I went to Ford Motor Company to do powertrain systems and all-wheel drive systems work. Got my master's, volunteered on a race car team, was really into cars.
No
And then
way.
realized that it was great. Just a quick aside, we traveled to all the racetracks you can think of, Watkins Glen and Laguna Seca. It was Grand Am Cup, modified Mustangs. I
That's
was on the pit
awesome.
crew, doing all that, volunteering in the garage, grinding things, welding things, just getting those cars ready.
Yeah.
Very, very fun. But I also realized that I had broader interests. So while it
Yeah.
was interesting, working at such a large company, I learned a lot about what a really big company is like. And I knew that the broad interests I had weren't going to be fulfilled there. So I left Ford Motor Company. That's when I moved down to Texas. I've been here since 2007. I stayed in hardware and I worked at a computer manufacturing company, became the director of operations. I had a team of 22. So that was my first leadership experience. I was
Mm,
27.
wow.
That was very good. Then that company went out of business around 2010. And I went to a customer of ours who was in warehouse management software. So this is large distribution centers and getting
Hmm.
a box out of off a shelf and into a truck in the right order. Again, I ran the hardware for them. So that was everything from the design and then contract manufacturing. We did all of our contract manufacturing in Korea. I spent a ton of time in
Oh,
Korea, which was
that's
great.
right. That's why you
I
know
did
some
the,
Korean. That's so
yeah,
fun.
yeah, that was great. I took my family there. So getting into the dad, I took my whole family there to Korea
Yeah.
and spent time there. But yeah, I learned a lot about advanced camera technology and control systems engineering. And there was a spark. I had a group of controls engineers who reported to me at this company, and they do software development. It's called ladder logic programming for the controls engineering. And, just as a hardware person, I had no professional exposure to programming. And it was a spark that got me really curious about that side of the world and how much of the modern world is built on software. And so
Yeah.
that's what drove me to go to Atlassian, which is a software company based out of Australia. I
Yeah.
joined them in 2014.
I've heard of them. I've heard of them.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
ended up staying there for a decade. I won't go too detailed what I did there, but my job was to do business transformation for the support department. And so that involved essentially, as that company was growing about 30% per year for a decade, building new tools, new processes, et cetera. I had a team of 135 data engineers, data scientists, software developers, business architects, program management, kind of anything you think of that would need to build the tooling for a support organization. And I love that. That was great. So I think the theme is I love cross-functional complex problems.
Hmm.
And it was really nice to have a team of such breadth to be able to go deploy change, because I also love the engineer in me, the person that likes to see tangible outcomes, love to see how the system was morphing by our input. And that was great. But you know this personally because we talked before, but the environment changed at the end. It wasn't the company I fell in love with 10 years prior. I joined when they were a private company at the end, maybe 15 or so thousand, whatever the official number is, $5
Mm.
billion in revenue. And I just had a spark that I wanted to go fulfill and bet on myself and go explore, again, this next phase of breadth where I could go out and be accountable for my own work,
Yeah.
decide who I work with, what I work on, and really get much broader. Because I've been reading a ton. I read starting 5 years ago. I started reading about 100 books a year. I'm not in love with the number. It just that happens to be the pace at which I read. I have a daily habit. And all of that breadth got me really excited about all of the different kinds of problems I hadn't had professional exposure to. And so all of that was kind of the impetus. There's a lot of complex things, but that's what drove me to start on my own 7 months ago.
Yeah, that's a lot of books for sure, and
Mm.
it's really fun to hear your background because it explains a lot on who you are and what I know about you.
Yeah.
Because when we met, I was like, "Wow, this guy is incredibly technical, and everything is very, very intentional and planned out, right? Everything is very,
Yep.
very
Very true.
planned out." And so it's really fun to hear your background. That's awesome, man. That explains
Yep.
a lot. And I definitely think that it's great, by the way. So for
Mhm.
whatever it's worth, I do think that it's awesome that you're taking this journey because it's so opposite to what you've done in the past that I'm
Yep.
very impressed that you even took the leap of faith to go do it. So super, super happy for you and proud of
Yep.
you in some weird way.
I appreciate that. And you're an inspiration. You don't know it. I don't know that we've talked about it, but obviously I didn't know you when I made the change. But a lot of the feedback I've gotten out here is to focus and to niche down, and I've kind of resisted that. And you are someone who I would not describe as someone who is similarly niche down. I think you have a lot of broad
Yeah.
experiences that you like, and so seeing you as a model for someone who can make it work, and there is a path there, even if a lot of the default advice is to kind of pick one lane and stick to it. I'm enjoying myself. I've seen you enjoy yourself, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm very happy to have gone out here.
Well, I'm glad you're finding some benefit of it because I definitely think it's incredibly hard and
Hmm.
it's painful to do it this way.
Yeah.
And it's also even harder because everyone tells you you're doing it wrong. And so
Yep.
it just like doubles the impact of the force of nature you have to will within yourself to keep pushing forward, right?
Yeah, well, I was going to make a joke. I played football in high school,
Oh, you
and I
did.
remember a coach getting mad at me because I would get into an open field, and then I would find a defender to run into, and he's like, "Kevin, the whole point of this is you're supposed to go around them. You're trying to hit to." And I just there was something in me, and I'm sure it's not truly like a apples to apples comparison, but there is something in me that really likes hard things.
Yeah.
I do the rucking, I do CrossFit, I like to run. There's
Yeah.
something I think about the forced evolution. And so even though it is hard and complex, I think there's something in me that likes how it challenges me to improve. There's sort of like a forced evolution that by going through this difficult work, I am becoming who I can be. And I need the exposure in order to go do that. I need the sort of a, environmental pressure to help me become who I want to be. So I really like that hard part about it.
That's amazing. I mean, I will
Yeah.
say the one thing that I do pretty well at is a lot of introspection, and I do a lot of
Mhm.
like cadenced review of kind of where I'm
Nice.
at, what I feel. And I will say that one of the things that I have qualified as happiness for me is the act of struggle
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
really enjoying that struggle. And I feel like I share that with you, although I don't think I'm as smart as you are, as technical as you are. I definitely think I share that aspect. I do think that that struggle of persevering through something and overcoming it is happiness. And it definitely
Yeah.
makes me happy. And I think it gives me purpose, a sense of like something to do and drive for, right? And so, but that's really interesting to hear that you've always sought after that. And I now it makes me really curious if you had to qualify what the hardest challenge you've ever overcome was, what was it and what are they?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things, and I'll say I'm sort of a late bloomer possibly to this whole positive association with struggle. I think when I was younger, there was a fragility in me that if I tried something and didn't succeed, that was a referendum on my capability, and so that
Mm,
then made me resist trying hard things because if I failed, then it sort of proved something about me. But through a lot of experiences, and maybe I'll tell you an example of a difficult thing. Come to realize that it's just a data point. I don't know. I have a much less stress related to challenge than I used to because I don't see it as a personal referendum. I think part of it is now that I'm 45, I have data points to see the growth journey that I've been on in my lifetime and
yeah.
know that it was the exposure to difficult things. And so now I kind of seek them out a little more than I used to. But to answer your question, I would say, without getting too detailed, I would say the most difficult thing was getting sick 7, 8 years ago, something like that. Bad enough that I honestly felt like I might die and was kind of thinking
Oh,
about
wow.
how to leave a legacy for my children and things like that. And, I'm fine now just to spoil at the end, and I don't want to get into all that. But like that was really hard to go through because at the time I had all three of my kids. My daughter was around 2. And it was one of those things like if I were to leave, she would have no memory of me. She might be shown pictures or told stories. And, that was one of the toughest things. But, dealing with kind of that personal journey of the dealing with some uncertainty around my health and then obviously having 3 young kids and, professional stuff, that was really a very difficult time, I would say, psychologically, like to your point of introspection and, thinking about things. That's what drove me to meditation and Stoic philosophy. And I credit that into parenting with a lot of like becoming more self-aware of how I thought and how some of those mental patterns were getting in the way of the kind of parent I wanted to be, the kind of professional I wanted to be, the kind of husband I wanted to be,
Wow.
even though I won't choose to go through it again. Like, I don't know that I would say I'd choose to go through it again. I see how large of a benefit that had on my ability to be successful in those other realms, like parent, husband,
Mm.
professional, because of just the introspection that was sort of foisted upon me.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing first and foremost.
Mhm.
And I will say that the mortality thing is huge. I mean,
Mhm.
and for whatever it's worth, I'm also 45, and I didn't necessarily have a scare in my personal life, but I think about it with my dad, and then that's a
Mhm.
very morbid thing to think about. But I also think about like how many times am I going to see him? Like, and I'm literally counting on two
Yep.
hands how
Yeah.
many times I think I'll see him. And it's just like it's a very morbid thought, and I know, but like it does change everything, like your
Yes.
perspective in life and everything, right? And so
Yes.
super powerful. But I'm curious now because you said that you had that 7 years before you started your business. Do you think that was actually kind of like when the idea germinated?
I don't know. The idea germinated, no, but I would say it planted the seeds that then sprouted later. And
Hmm.
so a very literal example is, that kind of journey and figuring out things, got introduced to Stoic philosophy, which has a variety of principles I think are very powerful. One of them is memento mori, kind of going on to this death thing. So that just means essentially remember that you're going to die.
Yeah.
And you kind of remember that others are going to die. I have on my wall over there the kind of counting down the weeks. So every week I'm filling in a circle that's I'm 1 week closer to death, which to your point is kind of morbid, but it really is it helps me be very present. And I think that was part of this journey to decide to change was, there's only so many weeks. The future is not a guarantee.
That's right.
And, I really started becoming in tune with my innermost desires. And there was an element in me, even though I've never been an entrepreneur, that really wanted to go do that. Like there was not a choice anymore. At some point, I don't know
Yeah.
when that flipped, but there was no longer a if, it was a when, and what are the steps I need to take to make this true, and I must commit to doing this, in part because I want to model for my own children this maturity that I've hopefully growing into, and this self-awareness. And you don't have to go on the default path. As an aside, grew up very poor, parents divorced. That drove a lot in me around like kind of insecurity around stability. Like, are
Hmm.
things going to be okay? And wanting to show my kids something. And anyway, that the being poor drove me into engineering, I think, in part. I loved it. I think I'm naturally inclined to it, but I also know it's one of the like Richard Scarry professions. Like, you can be an engineer, you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. And I wasn't aware of all the different options. My parents didn't go to college or didn't graduate college. They're not business owners in the beginning. And so, yeah, it took me a long time to realize there are other options out here.
Hmm.
And one thing I do not do is ask my children what they want to be when they grow up.
Hmm.
And part of that is I think I don't want to lock them into anything where they said it when they were 7, and then all of a sudden they get anchored in that and they feel like they must be that thing that they said when they were 7. I don't ask them that ever,
Yeah.
because I've realized there are multiple phases in life, and
Yeah.
there are many different options, and I want them to
Yeah.
answer that question when they need to answer it, and not kind of do that too far in advance.
I love that, man. That's awesome. And I probably should adopt that model because I do ask my kids what they're interested in, what they want to be. But I also, to counteract it, to give me some grace based on your ideology, because I think it is accurate, I do tell them that I expect them to change it. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do tell them that whatever you say now is not going to matter in 5 years. It's not going to matter next year because I guarantee you're going to be a different person. I
Yeah,
just
and
got
I
back.
think I could even ask, where do you want to start? Like, that'd be a fair question,
Yeah,
and I think it is
absolutely.
great to understand their interests, to your point. Like, let them cultivate a sense of their agency.
Yeah,
What do I want to be? I think that's a really
yeah,
powerful question.
absolutely.
Yeah, I like that.
I just got back from talking to my local high school at the
Nice.
entrepreneurship program, literally yesterday, and I actually was able to tell them the same thing. And I said, "Hey, no matter what pressures you put on yourself or your parents put on yourself, like just know that it's okay to change. You're gonna learn more about yourself. I'm a completely different person than I'm at 45 than I was at 40, and I'm a
Hmm.
completely different person than I was at 30, and definitely very different since I was 20. And so just to own that idea of evolution and evolvement, right? Because you're going to evolve, and it's so
Yes.
important to teach our kids that. But I am actually curious if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your childhood because you just started in it, but I'd love to know more. So, you said your parents were neither college educated or entrepreneurs, and you went to engineering, maybe, and I'm paraphrasing here, for the security of the role, right? The financial security of the role. But you seem like an engineer. You're very technical and you're incredibly intelligent and for lack of better words, very binary.
One, if my mom's listening, I want to make sure I give her credit that I think she would self-identify as an entrepreneur. I think that came later. Neither of my parents graduated college. I grew up on a farm in Michigan.
It's amazing.
My dad worked for the kind of automotive plants. He would go into the factory. I was a farmer. I would drive in the semi truck when he carried grain to the
Cool.
Weberville, which is where you drop it off in the silos and stuff like that. So, a lot of that farm upbringing. But, parents divorced around 7. My mom moved with my sisters to Virginia. I stayed with my dad in Michigan. I moved back down with my mom a year later. But there's just like a lot of uncertainty then. I don't have very
Yeah.
strong memories from that age. I don't know how much of that is just natural or how much of that is like a child protecting themselves from things that they don't like.
Yeah.
But I just don't have a lot of strong memories. I have these vague ones. But, going down with my mom and kind of my dad not being around, and he came and lived with us, but started working. He worked at 7-Eleven. He worked as a plumber. He hated it. He didn't have his family, so he moved back to Michigan. And then my mom, at that time, I think she was kind of to the entrepreneur stuff. She was exploring other paths. Part of that is it's hard to get a job, I suspect, without a college degree, even in the 90s. And so she was working at like the Arts Association and a few other places. And she was working 2 jobs. That was another thing I remember growing up is, we managed ourselves because my mom would be gone when we would get home from school. So I'd let
Yeah.
myself in. I would grab a piece of white bread that I would crumple up into a ball because it would last longer. I would eat a slice of bologna. My sister would cook dinner, macaroni and cheese. My mom would come home at like 9:30 or 10, and we might do a skit for my mom because
Hmm.
she had a hard day, and we would like do a skit for her, and then we'd all go to bed and do it around the next day. So a lot of like self sustaining, I guess,
Wow.
as a kid. And then I guess I don't need to give you my whole life story, but yeah, just a lot of that uncertainty. My mom did eventually like start her own business. She runs her own business now. That was sort of late in life, I believe, as far as when she
Hmm.
finally did that. But when it came time to pick a career, that wasn't what she was doing at the time, and
Yeah.
then B, yeah, like you said, I am kind of built for this engineering mindset, and so I probably would have selected it anyway. And I
Mm.
do think that was more the lead. Like I just was gravitated towards mechanical things and tinkering
Yeah.
things and
Yeah.
woodwork, etc.
That's
But
awesome.
then it's also like it felt like one of those like normal careers. It's like,
Yeah.
if you ask a guidance counselor, they would also encourage you to go down this path if you had my
Totally.
aptitude. So it all
Totally.
I wasn't really forced into it. I just feel like it was a lot more, I was awash in the current of life as opposed to, really sitting down and thinking about the life experience I wanted to have and, the initial conditions I wanted to set out. So I don't regret it at all. I think one, I loved it. Two,
Yeah.
I think it taught me a lot of frameworks and principles and
Yeah.
techniques that I still leverage today. But yeah, I'll also kind of pause there with that life story.
No, I appreciate it. Now I'm actually really curious on the next question here, which is in your current life in your entrepreneurial journey, what do your parents think about what you do and what you've done with your life? Have you ever talked to them about that?
Yeah. Without necessarily putting words in their mouth, I think my mom is a little bit nervous. I'll go with nervous, because she recognizes how hard it is. Once you're in
Yeah.
charge of your own business development, your own
Yeah.
sales, your own service delivery, your own everything, that's challenging. Not everyone is built for that. And I think she's a little bit nervous about that.
Yeah.
My dad, being the opposite, like, so he was a farmer and then he went into the state of Michigan is where he worked until he retired. So he did the
Yeah.
classic, 20 some years, worked in the maintenance garage and he then got his pension and is out. And so, he's interested without being knowledgeable.
Hmm.
Oh, what are you doing? How is it going? And just kind of like your normal dad stuff, just kind of
Yeah.
checking in.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, mom's nervous. My dad is more aloof.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it's probably also just from being a parent, right? I mean, I could
Mhm.
empathize with my mom when I said I was going to start my own consulting practice. She still thinks I'm a kid, It's so funny. Did I ever
Yes.
tell you this story? Did I ever tell you this
No,
story?
no, no,
So
no.
yeah, I think I was 40 and I was having a midlife crisis and I'm like, I got to get out of this. And I quit my
Hmm.
job as the CEO of a robotics company and I already made the decision and I was already making the decision to start my own practice. And I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, I'm starting my own business and I'm gonna go be a consultant. And she's like, okay, honey, let me talk to Dad and we'll think about it and we'll let you know what we think. And I'm like, Mom, I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like, okay, honey, I'll talk to dad, and then we'll get back to you and let you know what we think. And I'm like, Mom, I'm 40 years old, and
Yeah.
I'm not asking for permission. I'm literally telling you. And she still said, okay, okay, I'll talk to dad, and I'll let you know what we think. And that's how we ended
How,
the call. And I'm like, let me know what you think, Mom.
how did that
Yeah.
resolve? So now 5 years later, I guess what's your own arc? How are they feeling about you today?
I think they're still nervous. I mean,
Mhm.
as you probably are figuring out very quickly, it's incredibly volatile, and
Mhm.
it doesn't even out for years. I mean, I don't care
Mhm.
how smart you are; it's just one of those things that doesn't even out for a long, long time. And so, I'm on year four of building a myriad of businesses very similar to you,
Mhm.
and it's not just one, right? So imagine
Mhm.
one being super volatile and crazy. Imagine doing that with 13. It's like
Yep.
it's just insanity. And so,
Yep.
like every time she talks to me, I'm like either on cloud nine or I'm like, just like I might have a black
What
eye
have
and
I
I'm
done?
missing a
Yeah.
tooth. You know what I mean? Like it's just like,
Yeah.
what day of the week are you talking to me? So
Yeah.
I'm sure you can empathize with that a little bit.
For
So
sure. Yep.
yeah, they're not feeling too comfortable about it, but. It's one of those things though as a parent though because I think that I empathize with her sentiment that I'll always be her baby, no matter
Mhm.
how old I get, I'm always going to be the child that she wants to protect. And so I think that's probably similar to the sentiment your mom has about worrying about you.
Yet
Speaking of worrying about you and being a parent, do you want your kids to be entrepreneurs? Because you did mention that you're doing this to actually role model that behavior as well, right? So walk me through your thoughts on that.
I would certainly, they will have a lot more exposure to the concept of it. And I think they have it as an input where I didn't necessarily have that. And so it is a choice to them. One of the things I'm trying not to do with my children is put my own beliefs and structures and other things on them. Now, yes, I have values that I've cultivated and, there's a way of being in the world. I do think one of my roles as a parent is to create good humans. And
Hmm.
so all that said, when it comes to, their vocation or what they want to do, really it's more about finding what they were put on this earth to go do and letting them do that. And if it's entrepreneurship, lovely. And I might have some insight that will be happy to help them. My daughter has expressed wanting to be a firefighter. And
Cool.
so, okay, go do that, like
Yeah.
whatever makes you happy. And, recognizing that, yeah, whatever they want to do, I think I'm going to be okay with. There's probably some exceptions to that, but I don't think I have to worry about the edge cases too much. I think it's
Yeah.
more of a matter of them like really thinking internally about what they want to go do and recognizing that life is long. I also don't think that I would be too anxious if in the very beginning there was uncertainty on their own part, if they felt like, well, I don't know what I want to do. And, if my son,
Yeah.
for example, he's the oldest one, I have three kids, but, if he wanted to go travel for a year, I think I would also be okay with that.
Hmm.
He's going to go figure himself out and, there's plenty of time to start a career after that. I think I'd be okay with that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that mindset of just kind of keeping it open and creating a blank canvas for them. It shows a lot of introspection to be able to do that because I think so often it's like, we want them to be safe. Going back to what I was saying about my mom, right? We want to like kind of make sure that they edge themselves to have the highest risk of
Yeah.
success. And so that's awesome, man. I
Yeah,
love that.
because there's something I'm thinking about it while you're talking, which is I've said this to my wife, and can we swear on this show?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I was gonna say because my our job as parents is just to fuck our kids up less than our parents fucked us up, and I part of that no shade on my parents. That's not meant to be any kind of
Yeah.
criticism. It's more this acknowledgement that parenting is really hard. We all do it for the very first time. It's not like we've had a ton of cycles of this and we get better and better. You're kind of just thrown into the deep end, and now you're a parent and you're in
Yeah.
charge of the trajectory of this person. And it was more of a thing to like. Lower the stress of being a parent where instead of thinking am I doing this perfectly, it's like do I think I'm making progress on the concept of parenting based on my own lived experience. And
Yeah.
so that's just kind of a mindset that I've had kind of to that end. It's like whatever they want to pick to be, there are some things that I do want them to do, which is recognizing the importance of hard work. I think growing up I relied on my intelligence heavily, and hard work sort of took a back seat, and it took me a long time to
Mm.
realize how important the hard work was. And so firefighter, aerospace engineer, whatever they want to be, hard work is going to be a critical element of it. But outside of that, they're going to have a lot of leeway into exactly what they
Yeah.
choose and how they choose it.
Dude, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I mirror the same sentiment about evolution. it's like a cycle, right? It's like all you have to do
Mhm.
is be better than your parents because I don't think anything good or bad about my parents and parenting around their style or how they did it. I don't judge it anymore. I think that's kind of
Yep.
just, I'm
Yep.
older and now that I have kids, I don't judge it. I actually empathize with them. It's freaking
Yep.
hard, you know what I mean?
Very
And
hard.
you're like a kid, you know, you're basically doing it all for the first time. All I want to do is try to do a little bit better. That's it. Yeah, and
Yep.
so I love that mentality. So let's talk about your kids real quick. So what do they think about you being an entrepreneur now? What do they say about
Yeah.
you doing this?
Well, they have a lot of exposure to it, I would say, for a couple of reasons. One, we eat dinner together every day. Most meals we eat together, except lunch, of course, when they're at school and whatnot. But in
Hmm.
the summers, they're home, so they have a lot, they watch me be an entrepreneur a lot.
Mm,
And then I tell stories at night. I've got a proposal that's coming in, or this thing happened, and I'm trying to figure this
yeah.
out. They see me reading a lot. They see me bringing things up at the table, so they kind of watch it. So, what they think about it, I'm not sure. But they definitely have a lot of exposure. My oldest son was an intern in my company this summer because he's a sophomore and he's old enough to be contributing. And
Yeah.
so, he learned a lot about himself. I gave him a lot of projects, partly for that. Like, I want to see what sticks and what bounces off. What does he find easy? What does he find hard? And I want him to
Mm,
discover that in these 3 months. What help him inform what he wants to do.
hmm.
And, that mission was achieved. We did an end of summer, kind of review and had him assess what he kind of answer those questions for himself.
Yeah.
And, I don't know that he's going to want to come back. Like, we'll see. I think he's kind of interested,
Let
but I
me
don't know
have
if
him
this
next
is his,
summer. Kevin, let me
yeah.
have
But
him next
my
summer.
middle son very much is very interested. I would say he's the one, one of the things, just to share a ritual, we also snuggle the kids every night before bed. We've done that since
Mm,
they were babies. And so there's always this end of day sort of like one-on-one connection point, no matter what else is going on. So even if it's crazy busy, you've got 5 to 10 minutes that you're just kind of like relaxing and snuggling and talking. And, my middle son is the one who asked me the most questions about work, and he wants to know how this is going. And he's actually quite insightful. He's like, "What have you thought about this?" And I'm like, "That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Like, way to go." So he seems much more naturally attuned to it. And then my daughter, she loves to help. Like, she wants to come in, but a lot of the creative stuff. She wants to make swag for the
yeah.
company. She wants to make Canva designs. So she's
Yeah.
involved as well, or wants to be. But she's the youngest, so she's not quite to where she's asking deep business questions yet.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so cool that they're all kind of latching onto it. It sounds like they're all
Yes.
very interested and they also understand that it's part of they can get involved. It sounds like you're
Well,
very
as an
open.
aside, my wife is also an entrepreneur because she was a mechanical engineer like me. That's how we met. And then she's gone on her own journey, but she started her own midwife practice and
Yeah.
doula birth work practice. And so they see both of their parents kind of starting their own thing. So they do
Yeah.
a lot of it.
Yeah, and I love that she does that, and I definitely knew that, but I am but the next question was going to be what does she think? So I'm curious, have you been able
Yeah.
to ask her about her thoughts on you doing this journey?
Very much, probably more so than the kids, of course. Part of it was, I'll say, like she had changed her career, and the journey to become a midwife is pretty long. It's not like my journey where I can decide that I'm gonna start my own business, and there's not like a training and education and credentialing pathway that I need to go on. I just need to convince people I can solve their problem and I can start. Whereas if you become a midwife, you have to commit to several years of school. You've got to commit to the practices. So it's kind of a 5 year journey. And
Yeah.
so when I was having all these sparks of interest to want to go on my own, my wife was in school. So now I've got a wife who's transitioning a career. I've got 3 kids, 2 dogs. I've got all these obligations and things that, the W
Hmm.
2 life is really helpful for. There's a lot of security in that. There's a lot of predictability in that. But
Yeah.
meanwhile, I was feeling this tension where I don't like it. I don't want to be where I was. I wanted to be somewhere else. But I felt this pressure, obligation, as the father of the family and the one who was bringing in the income, that I needed that there so that my family wasn't put on in any undue stress or risk themselves.
Hmm.
And so that was in my mind, but it honestly got to a point where I kind of talked to my wife and I was like, I need to do something else. And this is what that's going to mean for the family. And let's put a plan in place to go. And I know you know this, but the example is like, I'm not 20. I can't just quit and decide that I'm going to go do my own thing.
Hmm.
I had to work nights and weekends for about a year and a half because
Oh
that's how
yeah.
long it took me to feel comfortable and put the conditions in place and the runway in place where, I could do this. And it wasn't like I had 3 months to make it work or everyone was going to be moving onto the street. I needed much more security than that. So it took
Yeah.
me that long, but she was on board with that. She understood, that it's hard to work 60 some hours a week and then cook dinner and be the kind of dad and be present that you want to be. You're missing out on events. I had to travel a lot. And all of that was just not consistent with the kind of father I wanted to be, the kind of husband I wanted to be. And, she saw that. And so even though it created this like tumult, she's always been that. my wife has been supportive every time I've changed industries, changed careers, take a step back. It always works out in the end. She's been very supportive throughout.
Yeah, she's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I have the benefit of having met her and hung out with her, but
Yeah.
yeah, she's definitely incredible. You could tell that she has a really, really confident, calm energy about her, and she's a perfect companion for an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I'll tell you
Thanks.
that right now. So yeah, she's great. I'm glad that you guys are able to talk about that, and she's so supportive. That's awesome. It's so critical,
Yeah.
dude. And it's also cool that she's also a business owner too, which is
Yeah.
awesome too. Share notes and practices and
We do
support each other.
we, like my P&L template, share it with
Yeah,
her because I got something figured out and she's sharing things with me and we talk about, she's
yeah.
investing in her website design and I'm asking questions and yeah, it's kind of fun that way.
That's awesome, man. That's great. So I do want to ask a couple of more professional questions. Then I want to ask some parenting questions again. So let me ask this one thing that's been on my mind ever since I met you. But when you're managing and you're the leader of a division at Atlassian of
Mm-hmm.
like very technical and intelligent
Mm-hmm.
like specialist, do you also have to be like the smartest technical specialist and then also a good
Yeah.
manager, or like what is that jump? Like how do you even lead a team like that? Because I'd be so overwhelmed if I was put in your position because everyone seems or is smarter and more
Yeah.
technical than I can probably handle.
Yeah, it's very. You're on the right track as far as like what to think about. I think for me, no, I don't need to be the smartest person, and I'm certainly not, educated in all those things. And it's not like a job if a data engineer is sick, I'm certainly not jumping in and filling in, although that might be lovely. That's not really how it's set up.
Hmm.
I learned pretty early on in my leadership journey that the leader or the manager is just another role. It's a different skill, and all of these skills need to work together in a harmony, but they're not intended to be kind of replaceable, or you're not intended to be the best version of whatever you're leading. And that's especially true when you're leading cross-functional teams like I am. I've never been a data engineer, but I think what works really well is I'm super curious. And
Hmm.
so I think I like to think that my staff can tell that I respect their work. I respect their opinion.
Hmm.
I'm asking them questions. I challenge them because I want to understand. And that's part of the role that I play is, if they explain why they're going to solve a thing in a certain way or why they can't solve it in another way, I ask a lot of questions about that. And, oh, what happens here? And partly I just want to know. And then the other thing I know is that by engaging in that dialogue, we're all coming out the better for it, by
Hmm.
they're essentially being forced to clarify their position, and they might realize something that I asked that they were blind to that gives them a better solution. And that dynamic, I think, works really well where immense respect for what they do, but, I challenge what they are saying and I'm curious to understand it. And I think the technical aptitude that I do have helps me do that kind of dialogue much better. So, I can start asking about architecture. And as they educate me, I'm slightly more dangerous in the next meeting because they just taught me something in the last
Mm,
meeting. And
yeah.
just kind of going through these cycles, I can kind of meet all these different parties and engage in that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes me very hopeful because I was always curious about it, about that role that you had, because it's like in very dumbed down version, it's kind of very similar to me and my businesses, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
really know much about the businesses I own as well. And
Yep.
you knew a lot about it, but I don't. And so I was always wondering, like, should I be more technically savvy to be a better manager? But hopefully, it sounds like you're actually saying that it's not necessarily the most important thing. It's more about curiosity, and then
I think that's right. Like, 'cause everyone wants, like, if you've been someone who's dedicated your life to a certain craft, if
mhm,
the person that you work for wasn't curious about what you did or why you thought a certain way, like, that's not going to feel good. Whereas if someone comes in and they're like, hey,
totally,
what are you up to? What's going on? What are the challenges? What do you need?
that's right.
That just creates a really positive dynamic. And so, yeah, you don't have to know how to do every role, but I think having that kind of curiosity and respect is really important.
It's awesome. Okay, let me go back to the parenting questions. You had talked about not being able to be the dad that you wanted to be for a year and a half to basically build the ability for you to go start this business, to go be the
Yep.
dad that you wanted to be again.
Yep.
And it's kind of like this time boxing slash investment to debit to credit, right? Or credit to
Yep.
debit,
Yep.
right? So now I'm
Yep.
curious, now that you're in the role and you are an entrepreneur and you're building this new chapter in your life, what does success look like for you as a dad now?
Let me think, because I guess I'll say the thing I'm thinking of, which is more of a future state. So I'll
Yeah.
share that and see if I have one for the current state. My kids are about to leave at some point. My oldest is a sophomore in high school. He's got 2.5 years left. Okay, now he's an adult. He's out in the world. What
Yeah.
does our relationship look like then? And I've
Mm.
thought throughout this whole journey, starting from when they were young, I knew that this was coming. It wasn't a surprise, but this, they go to college, they become adults, they're on their own. But I
Right.
want my kids to want to spend time with me when they're older, not
Right.
obligated to spend time with me, because that's going to be true. They do not have an obligation. There's no legal forcing function to have them do that, but I want them to want to come back. And that means that we need to have a really strong connection leading to that event.
Yeah.
I can't wait till they're 25, decide that I'm their dad and that I want to be there.
Yeah.
Better late than never if that were true. But what I prefer is that we're building connection along the way. And so I think for now, that the way it manifests for myself is like my son has football games on Thursdays. And so I leave. I drove to College Station. I drove to Elgin. I drive wherever I need to be present for him so that if something happens, good or bad, I'm there. I want to be there when he has the major tackle or the big event that he wants to tell me about. And I saw it firsthand. And I wake up early and I go to the swim meets, I go to the soccer games, I go to cheerleading, I go to dance and swim and all of the things because I want them to have those stories. Because I'll say a quick aside, my dad, when my parents divorced, he would call and I would tell him about my friends, but he doesn't know anybody. And I felt like I had to over explain all these things because he just wasn't there. And it's kind of exhausting, when you're a kid to like tell them the whole background about why something mattered. And I
Hmm.
like being around my kids and hearing their stories. I'm here when they come home. I know all their friends. I know the drama. I know what's going on. I know what's tough. And I think that's creating a strong connection that when they leave, they see me as someone who is invested in them, who cares about them, who's interested, who understands and they're going to want to choose to be around me when they don't have to be around me.
That's awesome, man. That's a great qualifier. I love that. And it's absolutely super important, right? Because I think, especially where you're thinking about in your stage, like you want them to be able to want to come back. And I think
Yep.
that that's really key. It's like you can't dictate what their lifestyle is like I can right now when they're
Yeah.
16.
Yes, that's true. And I'll just say another thing that while it's on my mind is this idea that love is an act, not a feeling. It's something that I've come to
Mm,
believe in where, what is love? How do you choose who to be with? What is this relationship we have with our kids? And I don't think there's anything that says that just because you have this biological relationship to another human, that there's this, you know, emotion that must be present. Like you have to earn it, I guess is
yeah.
another way of saying it.
Wow, that's
And,
beautiful.
so love is an act. So like the act of me, because I've had these tensions, young, I'm sure you understand these. It's like I get busy, I have deliverables, I have things I want to do. And then I go through my head and I'm like, oh, I'll just skip this football game. I'll skip this football game. And then I think about what if it's the world in which he has this amazing event? He's like all over the field, he has a career game, and I'm not there to witness it. I'm sacrificing that connection in service of this, I don't know, professional deliverable. And, it just really drives me to think about the act. I'm showing him that he's so important to me. I'm going to drive 4 hours round trip to sit in the stands for a 3 hour game because he means that much to me. There's a
Mm,
sacrifice there. And he sees that there are other things I do around the house or what have you that I'm servicing. There's an act of love. I'm demonstrating to them through my behavior and what I'm doing that I love them. It's not an expectation of a feeling that they must have for me as their father. It's I care for you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to be around for you. I'm going to answer questions for you. I'm going to take you places. We're going to have this party. We're going to do this thing. I'm going to cook dinner for you. All those are like acts. So I'm trying to
mm.
model for them that I love them through my actions as opposed to just this reliance on, some sort of feeling.
Oh wow, that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
very, very intentional. I like that. That's really
Yep.
clever. It is a really interesting way of unpacking love. I've never
Mhm.
had anyone try to break it down for me. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
By the way, it works with everything to me is all related. One of the things when I read all
Uh,
these books is I was doing it to try to be a better, professional. I was trying to be a
yeah,
better leader. And I was like, these are just relationships. These are
yeah.
parenting books. These are fatherhood and husband books. It's like how you relate to other people. And you see that that's just the same thing with your spouse.
It
And so the
literally
same
is.
with love as an act. It's like my wife
Yeah,
can make coffee. Like she could make whatever. But if I make her that coffee and hand that to her, or if I make her a margarita on a
yeah,
Friday night, that is me performing an act to demonstrate my love.
yeah,
And you can imagine if either you or your spouse did none of that, that doesn't feel like a very loving relationship
yeah,
anymore because there is no acts of service for each other.
yeah.
And so, yeah, acts of service works for kids. It works for your spouse. It works for your team. What are you showing to your team? How are you showing them that you love them?
Beautiful.
And, I've used the term love at work before. It's like, I love my team enough to hold them accountable to things I'm trying to help them develop. And
Yeah.
I love them enough to also fill in when something goes wrong and make sure that we make it right. And there's acts of love that you can do at work too.
Oh wow. That's really well said. Beautiful, man. Hey, let me switch gears a little bit. I have a bunch more questions, but I'm also realizing that I'm getting close to time here, and I want to make sure that I keep all my interviews tight because I know I interview very successful people, and time is very, very valuable. So let me switch over to my rapid fire questions that I like to ask all my guests. One piece of advice that you have for other parents or soon to be parents?
Meditate. I have trouble giving advice just because I don't know people's situations, but we haven't
Yeah.
talked about that yet. And I would say that was a very good unlock for me where it helped me recognize my presence. I have a very willful oldest child. And when he was young, he would do things that I could tell I would take a deep breath because I'm about to get enough lungs to yell. And
Yeah.
then through meditation, I became very aware of that. And I knew that the yelling isn't the kind of dad I wanted to be. And I would always model repair with my son. Okay, like after it was over, hey, that isn't the kind of dad I wanted to be. I yelled, but that's not how I want to engage with you. This is how I want to be instead. But it doesn't matter if you keep yelling. And so the meditation taught me the awareness that I could tell when I would take a deep breath in that I was about to yell, and then I could stop. And I still remember that day that I did that. I took a deep breath and then just let it out. And then I got down on like my knees so that I was at his height and had a conversation with him instead.
Mhm.
And so the meditation was like a hugely powerful unlock for like how I wanted to be more intentional about being a parent instead of being like reacting emotionally and unconsciously. So meditating was hugely helpful.
That's beautiful. That's really good,
Thanks.
man. I freaking love that. Another question I have: was there anything that was very surprising about yourself that you learned after becoming a parent?
The surprise, I don't know that I was not bad at it. I didn't have my dad. I didn't have my dad around. I'll admit I was very nervous. I didn't grow up, I'll say, with a dad around a lot, and so now I'm a dad, and I have to be the thing that I didn't have modeled for me, and I just felt like something was missing there, and I wasn't sure. Like, what would I do? How would I be? And so I think I was a little surprised at that because I was so nervous about that before it happened. Is like, how do I be a dad? I don't know. But I feel like I figured it out more or less.
That's awesome, man. That's really good. I love it. And then this question is really fun for me because now that I know you read 100 books a year, I am very curious. Do you have a favorite book that you can call out?
I do. It wouldn't be a classic business book, I don't think, but it's
Mm?
called Conflict Without Casualties by
Mm.
Nate Regier. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it really is about the drama triangle. And that's such a foundational framework for human interaction. And as we said earlier, you interact with your team at work, you interact with your spouse, you interact with your kids, and there's all these things that you can learn about drama. And so, do you know the drama triangle? There's a
Mm-mm.
victim mentality, there's a rescuer mentality, and there's a persecutor mentality. And they call it the drama triangle because anytime there's drama, like that sensation of drama, these roles are present,
Oh,
and they all
wow.
have these mythologies and other things, and they're all bad. That was the other thing when I learned it. I was like, these sound awful. Which one is the
Oh.
good one? And it's like none of them. There's this inversion on the top where it's like you're a coach and a creator and a challenger, I
Yeah.
think, and it's just a super powerful framework. And again, as it relates to kids, one of the things I learned around, like, I think it was that book, but they got into this technique of how you speak and getting into emotion, intention, and ask. And it's kind of modeled after the positive things of the drama triangle. But, again, my willful oldest child, we were doing these family walks during COVID. We're going through the neighborhood, and he's trying to impress his brother with how silly he can be. And he would run into the street, without looking, because that's what silly kids do. They do crazy stuff, and it doesn't matter if there's a road there. And
Yeah.
as a parent, I'm like, holy crap. And back to yelling, I would like, hey, get out of the street, because it's
Yeah.
dangerous. But it doesn't work. Like yelling at your kids doesn't always work. And so what happened with that emotion intention ask is I was able to recognize, okay, my emotion is fear. And I can tell them that, Everett, I'm really afraid when you run into the street that you're going to get run over. And then intention is like, I'm trying to get us all through this family walk without anyone dying and what have you. And so my ask is, can you please stay on the sidewalk? And if you're going to get into the road, make sure you're looking both ways. It's a much more constructive way to engage. And that's just one example, but like the drama triangle itself and then those kind of techniques, again, for how you interact with other humans, I find it to be just a really huge unlock for that.
Wow. That's awesome. I gotta read
Yeah,
that book. That's
it's good.
amazing. That's the kind of stuff that I love reading and learning about. So I'll definitely check that out. Thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.
And then to bring us home, when you're not being a super entrepreneur and trying to be a super dad, juggling all of these things while being an entrepreneur, what do you do for downtime? What's your fun activities?
So yeah, reading is a fun activity, and so that
Mm,
is in there. But I also like to do exercise, so it's
mm,
CrossFit or it's running or just something outdoors. I love being outside. As soon as the
hmm.
weather turns nice here in Austin, which means cold, I'm going to go do chainsawing because I love to chainsaw. We have a lot of trees here that have fallen down, and
Oh, cool, cool, cool.
just kind of like taking care of the
The yard.
environment. So
Yeah.
I like, okay, I'm going to go chainsaw and do stuff out. So like outdoor stuff, I love being outdoors. I love animals. Just all of that stuff is kind of my downtime, is either exercising or just being outside and doing stuff in the yard.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Kevin, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule and day to talk to me and share a little bit about your experience in life and help me learn about you and learn better ways to be a better dad and a better professional, man. I really appreciate it.
It was super fun. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed riffing with you on all these things. Yeah, parenting, kids, profession, all of that was just really exciting. So thank you so much.
Awesome, Kevin. Thanks again for the time. We'll talk soon. Okay, brother?
Yeah. Bye bye.